It was freezing in the churchyard, even before the dead arrived. Every year, Blue and her mother, Maura, had come to the same place, and every year it was chilly. But this year, without Maura here with her, it felt colder. It was April 24, St. Mark's Eve. For most people, St. Mark's Day came and went without note. It wasn't a school holiday, no presents were exchanged, there were no costumes or festivals, there were no St. Mark's Day sales, no St. Mark's Day cards in the store racks, no special television programs that aired only once a year. No one marked St. Mark's Day on their calendar. In fact, most of the living were unaware that St. Mark even had a day named in his honour. But the dead remembered. As Blue sat shivering on the stone wall, she reasoned that, at the very least, it wasn't raining this year. Today, I will be discussing the uses of visual and sensory imagery in The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Stiefvater uses the stylistic techniques of personification, colour, and sensory imagery as her main forms of creating descriptions for settings. The heavy use of these techniques boosts the atmosphere of the pieces and gives the settings a magical feeling. This is achieved through using techniques to transport the reader into the exact space that she has created. The Raven Boys was written by American author Maggie Stiefvater, published in 2012, and is categorized as a young adult magical realism. The story is set within the fictional town of Henrietta, Virginia, and the surrounding landscape. The story follows 5 teens on their hunt for the tomb of the Welsh king Glendower. Henrietta, Virginia sits on a ley line, which is described as a road of magical energy. Therefore, the characters often experience spiritual and supernatural happenings. To create this setting, Stiefvater uses colour, personification, and sensory images as a way to make ordinary places seem extraordinary. The exaggeration of these techniques and the changing of regular objects to make them seem magical are what gives the settings this mystical quality. Within the Raven Boys, the main methods that Stiefvater uses to describe place are sensory imagery, the use of colour, and personification. All 3 of these methods are evident in the following passage. As seen on the slide, the words that evoke the reader's senses are highlighted in yellow, colour in red, and personification in blue. The stream trickled sluggishly out of the woods from between 2 diamond-barked dogwoods. With Gainsey in the lead, they all followed the water into the trees. Immediately, the temperature dropped several degrees. Blue hadn't realised how much insect noise there was in the field until it was replaced by occasional birdsong under the trees. This was a beautiful old wood, all massive oak and ash trees finding footing among great slabs of concrete stone. The ferns sprang from rocks and verdant moss grew from the sides of the tree trunks. The air itself was scented with green and growing and water. The light was golden through the leaves. Everything was alive. Personification is one of the primary methods used to create atmosphere in the Raven Boys. The best example of this is in the first line on the slide. Stiefvater writes that the valley seemed to whisper secrets. Of course, valleys are unable to actually talk, but giving them this human quality adds an air of magic and mystery to the setting, and demonstrates to the reader that there is more going on in the valley than it seems. The same effect applies with the next example. This was a beautiful old wood, all massive oak and ash trees finding footing among great slabs of cracked stone. The tree is unable to actually move and find footing, but giving the tree a human action can assist the reader in seeing how the tree has grown and how it fits in with the other objects in this setting, without just describing it. This adds further to the magical atmosphere. Another example is the line, "The Volvo's trees squealed as they bit into the pavement." The trees are not literally biting into the pavement, but the reader can still use this description to create a realistic image of the tires squealing. The act of biting is often a symbol of rage and a way to display anger, so the image of the tire biting into the pavement shows the driver's anger. So while the image itself is not magical, the word choice and the action the words personify display the character's anger and therefore bring out a tense atmosphere. Colour is used within the novel to help the reader clearly envision the space that Stiefvater creates. Often the scene is already set, but the author brings in colour to really illustrate the image to the reader. As shown in the first example on the slide, this technique is often unnecessary. The reader would already assume that the canopy is green, but emphasising that it is green, green, green gives the canopy an almost magical quality, making it seem unrealistically green. Therefore, this adds atmosphere to the setting, and further transports the reader into that physical space. The second example on the slide has a rather opposite effect. Stiefvater writes, "The light was golden through the leaves." Rather than making the setting seem magical, this description grounds the image. The reader has most likely already seen a golden effect that is created when the sun shines through the tree branches, and can apply that prior experience to Stiefvater's setting, making it more relatable. Writers will often evoke some of the reader's five senses as a way to immerse them in the text. Steve Varda uses this method as a tactic to deepen atmosphere. Sound is used heavily throughout the Raven Boys as a way to further engage the reader. An example of this is, Blue hadn't realised how much insect noise there was in the field until it was replaced by occasional birdsong under the trees. The reader would always assume that these types of noises are present in a forest area, but adding it in reminds them of that and heightens the atmosphere by giving them something they can relate with and apply to the mental image they've already created. It also provides an interesting and clear contrast between the field and the forest, giving it that magical quality that Steve Varda is striving for. Steve Varda creates a similar effect by adding a touch sensation. She writes, "Immediately the temperature dropped several degrees." Again, the reader is able to emphasize with this feeling, and including it in the description is intensifying the atmosphere, as it is creating a contrast between the inside of the forest and out of it. Once Steve Varda has already created the image, and the feeling to go along with it, she also mentions smell. She writes, "The air itself was scented with green and growing and water." While none of these aspects necessarily have a smell, the reader can interpret that as they wish and construct their own idea of the smell depending on their personal experiences. The use of personification and vibrant colour in describing place gives the reader a clear image of the setting that the characters are in, but adding other sensory images immerses the reader further and lets them project their own experiences into the setting. This is what helps to construct the captivating and magical atmosphere within the piece. I am now going to read my own work, titled Collarbones, and then unpack how I use the same techniques that Steve Varda has used in creating atmosphere. We were out past the breakers, floating on our backs. The water carried us places, led us where it wanted. I had your hand, so wherever we floated together. "I'm dizzy," I said. "You're fine," you promised me. The blue of the sky was reflected in your eyes. We climbed from the water, letting the sea carry us to the shore. Your hand was still in mine, cool from the water. "You'll be here next summer?" "Of course I will," you promised me. "I'm not ready for it to be over." The heat of the afternoon sun burns into our skin, reflected up from the black tar underneath our feet, turning our already tanned bodies into golden brown beacons of summer. The ocean on our left is blue-green and loud, so loud. "Where are we walking?" I ask. "Does it matter?" you ask. "I guess not." This was the way it had been. You leading and me following, but you never led anywhere. We always ended up nowhere, and the sun would begin to sink, and we'd turn the way we had come. I would smell like sweat and salt air, and you would smell like you, like skin and hunger. I'm walking behind you on the thin footpath. We walk beside the beach, but never on it. "Why don't we walk on the sand?" I want to ask. I know you won't answer me anyway. You would prefer to scorch your feet on the black. Your shirt is like cling wrap across your back. Your shoulder blades are featherless wings. "Are you all right?" I ask. "I'm fine," you say. I believe you. The heat has made me feel airy, and although it's hot, I feel like it couldn't get better than this. The hotter it gets, the less we feel. The sun moves down across the sky until it is right in front of us, almost close enough to touch. Its reflection on the sea is bright. We are blind. We're on the sand. Why are we on the sand? It's the first time I've seen you on the sand all summer. We begin to shiver as we get up to our knees. The waves are small, not as small as you. They still knock you down. They roll in endlessly, and I pull you to your feet endlessly and endlessly. You'd swam before you'd learnt. You hadn't seen the waves. "I can handle it on my own," you tell me. Your hand is in mine. You're so small, I'm scared they'll wash you away. I smell like real salt now, like salt and hot skin and you, summer. We don't walk anymore. We go outside the house and sit all day on the boardwalk, looking at the water. Why don't we walk? Why don't we walk? I ask. I would prefer to sit. You shift slightly in the breeze like a sheet. Your bangles clank together like wind chimes. Your white shirt billows around you like a sail. You lay on the green boards underneath us. Your hips and shoulders are the tallest mountain. Your waist the deepest valley. Your breathing is shallow water, the waves making a barely audible sound as they crash through your lips. The grey of the sea is reflected in your eyes. I forgot that you were so different from everyone. I'm dizzy. You're okay, I promise you. She was landlocked. By the time that I got there, she was at the end of her rope. We're inside. It's the first day all summer that we haven't been outside. It's hot. I'm melting. You're in a blanket. It's wrapped around you like a shawl. The white of the sheet is reflected in your eyes. I need you, I tell you. I'm okay, you say. I don't believe you. I can see your edges. You're two-dimensional. I can see your collarbones and I'm scared. I have never been so unprepared. Like in the Raven Boys, I have personified certain aspects of the setting of the story in order to create atmosphere. Collarbones' narrator says, "The water took us places, led us where it wanted." Giving the ocean a human activity was an attempt to make the ocean seem extraordinary. This gives the ocean a magical quality, as the ocean, while pushing and pulling its swimmers, does not carry them. Yet the reader can still relate to this feeling, as the ocean is rough and will push you about while you swim. Sensory imagery was a huge part of building setting and creating atmosphere within the Raven Boys, and I have applied that in Collarbones to add a magical or extraordinary quality to an otherwise regular setting. Collarbones is set on the beach in summer, so hot weather and heat play a large role in creating setting. The reader would expect this setting to be hot, so I've created an heightened atmosphere in the text by exaggerating the weather. I've written that the character would rather scorch their feet on the black than walk on the cooler sand. This would be uncommon to see in reality, so it adds an element of strangeness to the seemingly normal action of walking alongside the beach. I've also written that the heat has made the narrator feel airy. The reader can relate to weather so hot that it affects the way they think and act. Including that not only helps to justify the narrator's actions, but deepens the setting by giving the reader something they are able to relate to. There are also many sounds associated with the beach and summer, and I've played on those sounds to give the atmosphere another level of depth. One example of this is the ocean on our left is blue-green and loud, so loud. The reader already knows what the ocean sounds like, so it is unnecessary to include that, but repeating that it is loud gives the ocean an extraordinary quality and helps it draw attention to itself. The ocean plays a large role in the setting, and making the narrator, and therefore the reader, hyper aware of it reminds the reader that it is there and reinforces its importance. Another example of sound within the piece is "Your bangles clank together like wind chimes." Using onomatopoeia brings not only sound to the story, but also to the reading itself, which gives the effect of hyperreality. This also forces the reader to recall a time when they have heard a similar sound, so they are able to relate it to the text, making them more active in their reading. Sight is used in every description of setting, but exaggerating that can add a level of clarity and atmosphere to a piece. I have used this method in the following line: "The sun's reflection on the sea is bright. We are blind." Giving this picture to the reader amplifies the atmosphere of summer, as again, they can relate to this and bring their own prior experience into the setting. I have also employed this reliability through smells in Collarbones. The narrator says, "I would smell like sweat and salt air." This is similar to Steve Futter's line, "The air itself was scented with green and growing in water," as the things described don't often actually have a smell. While everyone may have slightly different interpretations of how sweat and salt air smell and how they would smell together, they can apply that to the text and have it create a similar effect for everyone. I have used colour similarly to Steve Farter in The Raven Boys, as often adding a description of colour is unnecessary. The narrator talks about the blue of the sky, the black tar underneath their feet, and the ocean is blue-green. The reader already knows the colour of these things, but adding colour to the description exaggerates it and adds the feeling that the sky is unnaturally blue, that it is magically more blue than we expect it to be in reality. While Steve Farter uses colour, personification, and sensory images to describe the settings in her works, it is the exaggeration of these effects that gives the novel the atmosphere that it has. Maggie Steve Farter often uses certain aspects that a reader is already aware of and then exaggerates that aspect to give it a magical quality. She tells the reader that the trees are green, green, green. The reader already assumes that the trees are green, but exaggerating this gives it an unrealistic quality. This sort of exaggeration can be applied to any part of the setting that you're writing, but exaggerating different things will create a different atmosphere. Telling the reader that the trees are green, green, green gives a different effect to if you were to tell them that the dirt on the ground was brown, brown, brown. Where exaggerating the greenness gives it a natural and magical quality, exaggerating the brown of the dirt would make the setting seem dirtier. This is also displayed in how Steve Farter continues to remind the reader that it is cold. If she had only written it once, the reader may have forgotten, but the constant repetition of it reminds the reader that the temperature is an important part of the setting. This can also help the reader to relate to the text, as we've all been in a situation that we've been so cold that it is all we can think about, and we as readers can transport that experience into the text. Steve Farter often uses personification as a way to make ordinary objects seem extraordinary, which therefore gives them a magical quality. She writes that the Volvo's tyres squealed as they bit into the pavement. This gives the atmosphere a tense and angry feeling, as biting or baring of the teeth is often a sign of anger. This would have had a different effect if she had used a term like touched or caressed instead of bite. Using caressed would have made it seem like the tire squeal was done with care, and therefore would have shifted the atmosphere completely. The same goes for the valley seemed to whisper secrets. If this had been applied to merely one aspect of the town, such as a house, it wouldn't have given the entire setting the magical feeling that Stiefvater is trying to achieve. In conclusion, Maggie Stiefvater uses the stylistic techniques of colour, personification, and sensory imagery as a way to not only describe setting, but create atmosphere in the Raven Boys. She does this by exaggerating the settings until they seem unrealistic. These techniques are successful because no matter how unrealistic the description of setting sounds, the reader is still able to imagine, make personal associations, and therefore engage with the texts.